Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 25. Also, episode number 2 in a series of 4 on public land hunting. It's hard to believe that we're on our 25th episode, and we couldn't be more excited about bringing you another 25. We hope everyone's enjoying the public land series so far. We've gotten lots of good feedback. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to go ahead and post something on our Facebook page. We'd be more than happy to try and accommodate anyone's questions. With that, my next guest is Mr. Curtis Zabel. Curtis started out as a teammate of mine on White Knuckle Productions, and after that transitioned into his own show. His show is called Behind the Bow. After talking with Curtis, I very quickly learned that he has extensive knowledge on public land hunting, and I was eager to listen to anything that he had to say. So I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed asking. So enough of my rambling. Let's get on with the show. Before we do that, I just want to make one quick note. We are now officially powered by Ozonics, as I said in the intro to the show. And what that means to you as a listener is that once every month, Ozonics will be giving away to one of you loyal WKP podcast listeners an incredible prize package. And it's like I said last time, this isn't going to be a $50 value prize. This is going to be a significant value prize, like over $500 in some cases and even more in others. So all you have to do is listen to the whole show. At the end of the show, we'll give the directions on how to go ahead and register for the prize. And from there, just sit back and wait, and hopefully we call your name. Keep in mind, this prize giveaway will be done once a month. And again, we will announce it at the end of one of the shows per month from here on out till the end of December. All right, I think everyone's crystal clear on the whole Ozonics thing. Thank you very much to them for having the foresight to partner with us in this venture. So with that, let's all sit back, relax, and listen to my conversation with Mr. Curtis Zabel. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Today, we have installment number 2 of our public land hunting series. Today, I have joined with me on the other line is Curtis Zabel from Behind the Bow. Curtis, how are you tonight?
Great.
Good. First, let's talk about last year. How did everything end up for you last year?
My 2016 season was kind of slow. I started out the year finding some bucks in the summertime that I wanted to go after that were pretty big, and I was getting a bunch of trail camera pictures, and the problem with that property was I had a big issue with not scouting the property. There was a bunch of areas I scouted, and I just found this spot, and it ended up being a property that I didn't scout. So it was pretty much all run and gun, just looking off aerial maps, trying to figure out where they're bedding. And the first half of my year was pretty slow. Couldn't get on anything, and then ended up filming my dad shoot a buck during the rut. Ended up filming my buddy Skyler, and then I ended up shooting one late season. Okay.
And when you filmed all of these people that you filmed, was that on public land? Because primarily, when you're hunting yourself, you're doing it primarily on public land, right?
Right. Yeah. All my hunting the last 2 years now has been public property. So yeah, all the filming that I did, I filmed my dad shoot one on public. We had some incredible hunts that I filmed with Skyler, and I mean, we were, 45 yards, 50 yards away from some really nice deer, big bucks, and just couldn't seal the deal. And then during gun hunting, I filmed my uncles. That was on private property, but they ended up both shooting really nice bucks too. So that was pretty cool. And then my late season buck was public property as well.
Nice. How late in the late season were you?
I'd say, I think it was like 2 weeks before it closed. So it was pretty up there,
Right down to the wire, huh?
Right.
Cool. Well, we are we're getting together tonight to talk about a piece of property that I sent you and I'm going to talk about it with three of you guys that I know, and then we're going to get the three of you together, and we're going to compare notes after we air the three shows, and I think it's going to be kind of interesting. My prediction is that you're all going to come up with similar ideas, maybe not the exact same ideas, but similar ideas on how to hunt it, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and that kind of stuff. So if you're ready, let's dive right into it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So with respect to the entire property that I sent you, we'll get into the sections here in just a little bit, but as a whole picture, so to speak, all four of the sections that we've singled out, section 1, 2, 3, and 4. How do you feel about this property as a whole? In when I say how do you feel about it, what, do you like the way it's laid out? Do you like what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Is it somewhere that you would choose to hunt? Those kind of things.
Right. Well, first off, when you sent me it, I noticed that it was a hill country, which I primarily like to focus on hills during the rut, because I don't know. I've heard that in western and southwestern Wisconsin, a lot of the bigger bucks are getting shot. And I'm located in central Wisconsin, so I kind of focus my efforts more towards the western side of the state where the bigger bucks are getting shot. And I really love how beautiful it is and everything. But as far as that goes, so I realized it was hill country. The only thing that I didn't like is it seemed like there was a lot of parking lots. And I necessarily don't like a whole ton of access points. There's a lot of areas where you could access from the road and a lot of areas where you can access from parking lots. So to me, it kind of looked like there was a lot of fields and a lot of open areas, I guess, with a lot of access points. And so unless someone told me or I had a clue, like by shining or something, that there was some big bucks in this area, I probably wouldn't pick this property to hunt. But, if just to go over this map, I guess, I'll tell you what I think,
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm after.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's not something that you would have picked to hunt, and it sounds like because of the number of access points, the ease of access. Would that be fair to say?
Right, ease of access. I do like that there's a river going through the middle of it. I like that. I like the steep terrain in some spots. It gets pretty steep. You can tell on the topo, and it does show that there's a lot of like food sources and stuff. It looks to be like a lot of crop fields and food sources.
Mm-hmm.
So that obviously is going to have those. Those are going to be bedding fairly close to that for sure. And then it'd be easy enough to hang and access trail cameras and stuff just right off the road on some of those fields and whatnot to for inventory checking and whatnot.
So let me ask you, if we can just step back a second. Why is it that you like a river or a water body? What is? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, two things, I guess, is one, it always seems like I find the bedding a lot of the bedding. I focus primarily on finding bedding areas and then kind of going, because crops are always changing, but the bedding areas tend to stay the same for the most part. Early season bedding areas differ if the crops are changing and whatnot, but for the most part, like the bedding areas that stay the same year after year after year, that has nothing, that'll always stay the same, as never going to change unless something huge changes, like, if they start cutting down a bunch of trees or a different access point has changed or something like that. But as far as rivers go, they like to bet on like the bends of the rivers. And then as far as that goes, I also like to use water as access. Rivers are like really sweet to access down, so because the deer aren't going to smell your access trail coming in and out, and I think kayaking or wading the river is a lot easier than a lot of other options.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned bedding. What is it that you consider? How is it that you identify bedding? Is it just simply the structure of the timber? Is it the density of the timber, or what is it that you're looking for when you're saying bedding?
Okay, well, for hills, I tend to find the majority of the bedding in thick areas. A lot of times, like in the western part of Wisconsin, at least when I scout, a lot of times I'll find a lot of just open timber. It just like all open hardwoods, and it's kind of hard to get after at first, like to think, scouting this huge chunk. But really, when you look at it, for the most part, a lot of times on these points and stuff that come out, not on the top itself, but like the points, they like to bed on those leeward sides of the hills and the points and stuff. So the wind is coming up over the top of the hill, and the leeward side is the side that's on the side that the wind is blowing over. So they'll get the scent coming from the top, and then when the thermals kick into effect and they start rising from the bottom, they'll be able to smell down below as well. So in the hills, they like to bed on those points, and up above, like kind of that top third on the points and the little, knobs sticking out and whatnot. And if they're really thick, that's like key. Like if you have like a bunch of points that jut out that are really thick and it's away from access, it's like almost 100% of the time you go on the ends of those points, you're going to find a bunch of beds. And then that's just for hills, I guess. But they'll bed down below as well. There's sometimes like you'll find like smaller like little tiny points that come out down below more, not just on the top third, but down below, and they'll bed there too. I guess it just depends on the property and whatnot as well.
Okay. And we'll come back to some of these if that's okay with you, because I'd like to just pick your brain a little bit as we go along on what it is that you're saying. So that's kind of your 50,000 foot view. It sounds like it wouldn't be a place that you hunt. And that being said, let's table that for a minute, and let's talk about what are without again going into each specific section that we'll do in just a second. What are the top three things that you look for, whether it's hill country, whether it's marsh country where you're at, or whether it's maybe if you were over by me where there's not a ton of topography, but there is a ton of contrasting timber to marsh, back to timber to ag fields. What are the top three things that you would say that you look for? I think probably one of them that you mentioned. Actually, go ahead and answer. What are the top three things that you look for?
Okay, I guess first one would probably be access points is my number one. Like if it's really easy to access, a lot of times it's not going to be that great. So I like to look for landlocked areas. The steeper the terrain, the better. The nastier the swamps, the more the water. That's definitely what I look for. So that, I guess that would be my number one. Number two is I like to look at, I have an Ozonics map chip for my GPS, and I like to look at how big the surrounding properties are to the public land. I like to look at how big of chunks of timber, you know what I mean? Like, if there's a huge chunk of timber that's right next to the public property, and a lot of times that's going to be holding, you know, a lot of times they're going to be managing that and whatnot. So if there's like a bunch of tiny little chunks of private property surrounding it, a lot of times you're going to have, you know, a couple of those guys at least going back from their property that's connecting to the public to hunt the public, and it's just like hunting, you know, it's just like another access point, I guess, for another hunter.
Okay.
I also like to look at how close to like the bigger cities and stuff. It seems like the more populated areas I kind of stay away from, and then, you know, the farther away you can get from, you know, the more populated, more busy roads, you know, stuff like that, I guess.
Okay.
Less pressure, you know.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't remember if that was 3 or not, but let's assume it was, and let's start breaking this map down. As we look at the map on the top left-hand side there, section 1. Is there, again, assuming that this is a place that, you know, piqued your interest, what in section 1, in terms of, you know, again, a 50,000-foot view, what is it that you would look at and key in on? What makes you tick, I guess, when it comes to, you know, what you see there?
Okay. Honestly, when I first looked at this, section 1 really didn't have much. It looks, man, I see 2 parking lots there with roads going through the middle, lots of egg fields. I mean, the only thing that I could probably pick from that is just on the very east end, down the corner, if you want to, you know, break it up into the quadrants 1, 2, and 3 right there. Just on that east corner there, connecting to the section 2, there's some ridge points there that kind of are jutting down next to the river there, and my guess is they'd probably be bedding on the ends of those points with a westerly wind. And then if you look down on section 2 there, sorry if you want to. I don't know if you want to keep it section 1 and section 2, but they're kind of close to each other.
Yeah, they are. If that's all you see in section 1, that's perfectly fine. What do you see in section 2 that you like or don't like or whatever? Right,
and this is primarily I'm saying, like, this is primarily me talking as far as like rut hunting goes. So like section 2, I you know, that very southeastern section there, down next to the river there.
Yep.
I like that, actually. That would be my first choice out of all the sections, is the very southeast part, right next to the river. And there's some points that jut out next to the river there, so they'll probably be bedded there with a northwest wind and a north wind, and then if you get a westerly wind, they'll be bedded on the very east side. You know, they'll probably change locations of bedding depending on the wind to have it more in their favor. And then I also like that river is down below, so you could probably, you know, sneak up, you know, down the river there and sneak up to where you want to hunt, right down next to the river, so you're not laying down a bunch of ground scent and whatnot.
Okay, so
I did see
when you're talking about accessing that river, I know because I've watched your shows on Behind the Bow. I've watched you either take a skiff or a canoe. I think it's a skiff. In this case, looking at it from, you know, Google Maps, is this something where you'd pack in a skiff a ways if you had to, or would you just try and walk it?
I probably would end up, depending, I mean, I'd have to see the river. I actually use kayak for the most of my hunting, but...
Yeah, I guess I said skiff. I meant kayak, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the river, I guess, I mean, if it's like shallow and rocky, I would just walk it, but if it looks like it's going to be kind of iffy, I'd probably bring the kayak with me. And then another part of the section too is, it seems like on the west part there, like in between those 3 parking lots, there's a chunk of timber there, and as far as like rut hunting goes, I'd probably just like pass that. I'd be like, yeah, there's nothing there, but there is a little funnel you see connecting a couple, that little smaller chunk of private and then the bigger chunk on the public there.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of little funnel on the very west end.
Are you talking about in section 2? Just so it almost looks like the head of a wrench facing southeast. It would be almost like a crescent wrench shape. Like there's a square that's cut out right above parking lot number 4, up and to the left of parking lot number 4. You see where that square is cut out of that timber?
Oh yeah.
Is that where you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
I'm looking more for just to the west of there, like all the way to the west. There's a little funnel area in between that bigger chunk and then the smaller chunk, and you see that little part of it's on the private property and part of it's on the public property.
Yep, I do see. Yeah, okay.
Just to the left, that little squiggly field.
Yep. Just
to the northwest, I guess, of the little squiggly field. I'd probably check that out just in case there might be some good trails coming through there.
Okay. And you said you're looking for trails coming.
I'd be looking for connecting point, trails coming from, on the south part of the property to the public chunk. And, bucks would be running those trails and whatnot. But I'm also thinking, I probably won't look at that during the rut. But early season, if you look at a topo map of that area, there's a bunch of little tiny points that jut out down in there. It looks like there's like a little creek down in there.
Mm-hmm. And
that, I feel like there could be some deer bedded on the ends of those points earlier in the year. Kind of, a lot of these public chunks, I think, don't necessarily get really hit hard until, the rut. And so it could be really sweet early season, and then come rut, everyone goes in there and the property's junked. But I mean, so during the rut, I would just kind of pass that area up.
Okay.
But early season, I kind of think to myself, I gotta have the hunch of, there could be some deer in there because there's some fields close and whatnot, and it looks like it could be thick down in there,
Sure.
So.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and as I zoom in on that with my computer screen here, I can see that you're right. There is a relatively significant piece of water there that's going to hook up with that bigger river. So would you say that water's a big piece of the puzzle if it's available? I mean, is that something you key in on no matter where you're at?
I mean, I guess I like to key in on like terrain. I guess when terrain starts switching to a different terrain, like transition areas, like a river kind of creates a transition where, you know what I mean, like
mm-hmm.
they like to follow the river, they like to bed with like water to their back. A lot of the times, it just seems like you see a lot of deer and a lot of deer sign near water, and obviously they have to drink,
right?
But I mean, a lot of times, it could be anything. It could be just something you pick up from a map. You can just like up in section 4 there. And we're skipping around a lot, I know, but I mean, if you looked up in section 4 there, there's a bunch of let me switch maps here that I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered something on here. If you look up in section 4, there's a kind of by the first parking lot there's like some little areas that look like there'll be like a bunch of tiny little, they kind of look like clear cuts almost.
Sure.
You know.
Yep.
Stuff like that is things that I would like want to check out and look for, because you find a lot of the bedding on like edges of things, edges of rivers, edges of transition areas, you know, little bowls and fingers and stuff like that. You don't necessarily just find them in the middle of nowhere, you know. There's usually a reason, and once you find a good bedding area, it kind of makes sense on why it's a good bedding area, because either really hard to get to, or they can see a lot, or, you know, something. They're giving them an advantage. It's keeping them alive.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a quick question. As long as we're by that parking area, I think it's labeled number 1 on the map in section 4.
Yeah.
That parking area, if I don't know if you're looking at it right now on your computer screen or not, that parking area looks pretty big to me. And I'm not a public ground hunter. I'm going to try to be, but I'm not yet. That parking area looks to me, it would suggest to me, just from looking at it from this map, that that's something that would get used quite a bit. Would that be a fair assessment? Just because of how nice it is. I mean, it's tar where the rest of it's gravel. It's got a nice fence up along around it. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I don't really pay attention too much to how well the parking lots are manicured. I just look at it as it's a parking lot and there's going to be people there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But not necessarily. I mean, I don't even like look at parking lots, I guess, for the most part. What I'm looking at is the roads, you know, because anyone could just drive down the road and pull over. It doesn't have to be a parking lot. You know, I'm just looking for areas that are just farther away, you know, from any kind of access there is, besides water, obviously, because a lot of people tend to stay away from that. But, yeah, I mean, I treat a road as a parking lot, really, you know.
Okay, I've got a question about that. Only just from a law enforcement side, I'll get back to that in just a minute, or at the end of the show. But we'll revisit that whole parking lot question, or that parking question, a little bit later. But so in section 4, you would key in on again what areas?
Okay, if we wanted to go to section 4. Let me bring that map up again here. I wouldn't even necessarily look at it because it's so close to the parking areas. But if those, I was just giving you an example of those little clear cut areas. It kind of looks like there's a bunch of little pine trees, or it was logged at one point in time, or it looks really super thick.
Straight east of that parking area?
Tell there's like a trend. What's that?
Straight east of the parking area? Is that what you're talking about?
That's one little section there, but then there's 2 more up above that.
Yep, I see them. Yep, I gotcha.
In between the parking.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I'm talking about, is those little, you can kind of see there's a bunch of little, you know, bushes and all that stuff in there. So, I kind of like to focus, I kind of like to check those areas out for sure. But, as far as section 4 goes, there wasn't a whole lot as well that I'd probably check out. There is, see where it like goes down into a little tiny triangle there? I guess not really. Yeah, I mean, it's not really a triangle, but a little sharp corner. I'd probably check that out, but now that I'm looking at it, the road's there, so I probably wouldn't. But yeah, there's a lot of access points.
Yeah, I mean, there is. There's not a lot of distance between even that parking area and that first, we'll call it a clear cut straight to the east. As I measure it here, I don't think that's more than 700-800 yards from the parking lot.
Right.
Like even the laziest of laziest people could make it that far.
Right. And it doesn't look like it doesn't matter. I guess it doesn't really matter how far away from the parking lot it is. It matters of how easy you can get to it. Like if there's a bunch of crap that you have to go through, you're walking through it, you're like, man, this really sucks. A lot of times people are thinking the same thing. So, I mean, I don't care if it's like 800 yards away. If they have to walk through 200 yards of just the nastiest tamarack swamp you could walk through, then that's probably going to weed out a lot of people. But going back to the section 4 there, I actually just noticed this now that we were looking at it. When I was looking at it before, I didn't notice it, but to the very north, it's the very south parking lot, just to the north of that, along the river there, it's kind of like, there's kind of a little section there, but it doesn't hit the road. Did you see that or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that section I'd probably check out down in there. It looks, a lot of times when you're looking at the maps and stuff, a lot of the bedding is in areas that necessarily don't have a whole lot of trees, or the trees you can tell are just really small.
Right.
You can almost tell that, the trees are really tiny and it's hard to get to. Obviously, they're hard to hunt areas, and because the trees aren't very big, and that's where they end up bedding, where they're not being hunted.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's move to section 3. I guess we really didn't go in order here, but that's perfectly fine. I'm really interested more than any of the other sections to hear what you have to say about this.
Okay. Let me pull up. I'm zoomed in here. Hold on. All right.
It's got 2 parking areas, right?
Right. You got 2 parking areas there. If you look at a broader view of the whole area, I noticed that just to the east, it looks like a pretty large piece of private property. Like, it looks like they could have some food plots going in and out over there, and but on the other side of the river there, I don't know how well this boundary map shows it, but if you could get up onto those ridge tops, like just straddling that private property line on the other side of the river, that would be a pretty sweet spot. I could almost guarantee you it'd probably be pretty good. But, kind of on the very north parking lot there, if you head straight towards the river from the very north parking lot, and there's a little chunk that juts out on, over on the other side of the river there. If you could get up top, I don't know how far that goes. Sometimes these boundary maps are a little off, but if the public property goes up a ways, because there's a big ridge there.
So you're saying across the river, up on top of that ridge,
right.
It kind of makes a U shape, if you will, sort of a U, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Okay, up on top of that ridge.
There's some points jutting out on the other side of that ridge there. It looks pretty steep, and it looks like a good private chunk over there. So that's what I would key in on that section. I do also see, if you look, I know it's right next to the road, but if you look at the north part of the north parking lot, and you go along the road going headed south from that north parking lot, there's just a bunch of tiny little, open areas and trees and stuff. I don't know how much that gets hit or whatever, but I feel like that could be some overlooked areas, like right next to the road, that there could be some bedding areas in there. But, I mean, that would obviously take some feet, boots on the ground to figure that out.
Gotcha. So
it's fair to say then you probably aren't going to be hunting here. I haven't uncovered a gem for you.
I wouldn't just like pick this out, obviously, right? Like what I was saying before, I wouldn't just pick this property out. But there is a lot of areas, and I'm always learning. You know, it's not like I know everything about public hunting. I'm always learning stuff, and you know, critiquing the way I hunt and everything. And there's a lot of times that I'm just dead wrong. You know, like I'll be like, yeah, this spot sucks or whatever, and then I'll be talking to some people, or I'll hear about a big buck getting shot next to this property. I'm like, you know, kind of keep your ears open, and then you know maybe okay, I'll just take a trip down there this spring and check it out, even though I thought it sucked. And you go and take a look at it, and it turns out to be really good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it just takes, you know, walking a lot of properties. Like I've walked pretty much every weekend in the springtime from, you know, January till turkey hunting starts. I'm pretty much walking every weekend, new properties and new states and new spots. And I mean, a lot of times you'll hear about, you know, a property that, you know, that I had picked out that I didn't have picked out, that I've overlooked 100 times, that I'll just go out and check it out. And sometimes it ends up being, you know, something better than I originally thought.
Sure. Okay. I said that originally that I'd get back to a couple of things. I think that pretty well sums up how you feel about this property, what it is that you would look for. Is there anything else that you want to mention about this specific property, or maybe just something that you typically would look for that would either get your attention or, I guess, sway your decision one way or the other that you haven't mentioned? This is all self-serving, by the way, because I'm going to use as much of this knowledge as I can this fall.
Let's see. I guess not really so much on this property, I guess. But I want to say that, like, a lot of times the public the chunks that I'm hunting aren't necessarily like really good pieces to hunt all year long.
Okay.
A lot of the times the pieces that I'm hunting are only good for a week or two. Like, it depends on the crops. It depends on if they're bedded there. It depends on if they're bedded on a different property, like a neighboring property, or it depends on pressure on the private properties. Like, there's a little, I don't know, it's like only like a little 40-acre chunk, and it gets that really sweet time during the rut, and it's good. And then everything else, it just, you know, the whole rest of the year, it's pretty much trash.
Gotcha.
You know, and it could be just the opposite way around. If you got a little 40-acre chunk that it just sucks, you know, but there could be a buck bedding there early season, like right next to a cornfield edge or something. Just, you know, so you don't ever want to like just overlook things. Just kind of almost keep an open mind with everything, and just try to use your brain as best as possible, and you know, go with your gut. It's pretty much all I.
All right, let's switch things up a little bit, if it's okay with you, and we'll go away from this property for a minute. Since you primarily hunt public land, let's say that you are, you know, wherever in central Wisconsin, and you're on a public hunting area, and you just want to park your truck. Do you do that? Have you had any experience with that, and what the legalities or illegalities are? And I'm just curious from your experience, whether or not you know if you can park on, you know, anywhere or not anywhere, or exactly what are the rules of the road, so to speak, or Do you have any idea?
I guess I usually use the parking lots for the most part. If I tend actually about almost 100% of the time I'm using the parking lot. And if I want to head somewhere else, I'll just walk down the road to where I want to go and jut in there, because I don't want people knowing where I am. I don't even want to give them the slightest clue. If I'm parked down the road, I'm going to be hunting the other part of the property. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want anyone knowing where even give them the slightest clue on where I'm entering or exiting or anything. So, I mean, I guess for the most part, I always use the parking lots. I really don't even know what the rules are. I mean, sometimes I see areas with like no parking signs and stuff, but I mean, I think if there's no parking signs or whatnot, I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to park, on the side of the road anywhere.
Yeah, I just did.
If it's public property,
I did some research, and I was a little bit shocked at what I found. In that, I understood that on a county road, in Wisconsin, this is on a county road, the county owns a certain portion of that. They actually own the road and whatever it is, 50 feet from the center line. So technically, I don't know whether legally you can still park in the ditch, and get out and go hunting if you wanted to. And I don't think any of this comes into play until somebody calls it in and complains. But I was surprised to find that on a township road, now again, one that's not owned by the county, so it's not a county trunk, on a township road, the landowner owns to the center line. So by the letter, from what I could uncover, at least off the DNR site and the local sheriff's department site, was that you couldn't park on a township road, which was surprising to me, because I just figured, well, you can park anywhere there's a road. You should be able to just, two tires in the ditch, and you're good to go, right? But that apparently,
well, you'd think that the township road you'd be able to park on the side of the road, though, wouldn't you? Because I mean, if that's public property,
if it's public property on a township road, that's a great question, and one I don't know the answer to. That's why I was, because we're sort of talking about in Wisconsin there can be nature areas, there can be different areas that are open to the public that aren't quote unquote public, but they're open to the public. In which case that would be an issue. But let's say you had a public hunting ground on one side of the road, and you're on a township road, and then the other side of the road is owned by, Curtis or Jason. And if you parked on their side, well, technically they could, raise a fit and have your vehicle towed. And I didn't know that. So I was curious if you had heard any of that. So I called one of the sheriff's department deputies that I knew of, and he said, yeah, that's correct. 100% correct. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, note to self, is
parking lots.
Parking lots. And if you're gonna use those areas that aren't quote unquote public hunting grounds, you better have a plan on where to park that's completely legal. Otherwise, you and I have had some conversations about stuff like that, or you're just going to set yourself up for trouble. And that's why I asked. I wondered if you'd had any experience with that whatsoever. Well, cool.
Right, definitely. I personally have not. I've actually heard of people hunting, MFL properties or forest crop properties or whatever, and having issues with landowners and all that stuff. But I personally have not run into that issue yet, for the most part. So I guess I'll just knock on wood there.
Right. So is there anything specifically that you do, because certainly there's places that you have that and that they're your go-to areas, and is there something that you do before season on a new property, during season on a new property, to scout it to get a gauge of what kind of pressure's on it?
I like to walk pretty much pretty much all the area. I pretty much what I do is I pick all the areas out that I want to step foot on Google, and then I'll go in there and check them out. If there's, I don't care about all the or all the pressure in the areas that I don't want to hunt. There could be there's actually a public area that I hunt that there's always I don't know, during the rut, there's 4 or 5 cars in that parking lot every day, every time. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. If everyone else is hunting, you got to figure out where everyone else is.
Sure.
If everyone else is, you got ribbons, or a lot of times people will keep their trail cameras up and their tree stands up, and you can see a lot of times people cut trees and stuff. You're not supposed to do that in public, but you can definitely tell for the most part where the majority of people are hunting. And you just stay away from that. It's kind of just pretty straightforward. The deer aren't going to be where the people are. And I don't necessarily, that's another thing too, is you don't want to, I guess a lot of people I think might be all pissed off if they go into a property that they've been hunting for a couple of years, and all of a sudden some guy figures it out and he's got a tree stand there, or he's got this there. And I know it's illegal, out of season to keep your stuff there, but I try to completely just take that out of my brain and think, okay, I'm just going to focus on what I can do. You know what I mean? There's some stuff that you can't control, and a lot of times you just have to try to stay positive and, find a new spot, keep finding new spots and keep stacking those spots. And, the more and more you do it, the more and more spots you have, and you lose a chunk here or there for certain situations, you're always going to have backups. And, I guess it doesn't pay to sit there and complain and worry about other people. And I think it's a lot, more beneficial to you if you just keep going and going and going and figuring new spots out and learning more instead of dwelling on, someone else screwing it up for you. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So is there a certain number that you shoot for, a number of properties, or do you just, I know during the rut you'll travel farther than you will in September or early October. At least I'm guessing that's the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Not because I'm smart, because that's what most people do, I guess. And it's fair to say that you'll travel a long distance if you have to, if it's worthwhile. And do you find a lot of those things via Google Maps, or do you spend a lot of time on Google Maps once you find an area? That's how you're primarily scouting it to begin with?
Yeah, I'm definitely pretty much. There is no limit for me. Like, if I find a chunk 4 hours away that I'm like, everything adds up to be sweet, I'm going there. I don't, that's going to be somewhere where I'm going to check out. I don't have if it's not within 2 hours of me, I'm not going to go there. If it looks good to me and I know there's big bucks there, or I get a hint from someone like, hey, you should go check this out, or
sure,
whatever it may be, and I have a feeling it's going to be a good spot, I'm going to go there,
Gotcha.
But yeah, for the most part, I check everything out by Google and Topo Maps first before I even go look. And like what I like to do is, mark all the spots that I want to even check out, kind of just ignore everything else, but mark all the spots I want to check out that look good from the map where I think will be good, and put that on my GPS. So I'll go check all those areas out first, and then if I have time remaining, I'll go and check, other areas, that I didn't obviously see from the map or whatever that I thought maybe would look good. And then right when I get home, well, not all the time, sometimes I'm tired or whatever, but for the most part, a lot of times right when I get home, I'll plug my GPS into my computer, pop it up on the, Garmin base camp or whatever it's called, and look at all the areas that, I'll mark everything. I'll mark beds, rubs, scrapes, what I think's happening, write notes, all that stuff.
Hold on a second.
And I'll look at it.
You have and I apologize for stopping you. So you're bringing a handheld GPS with you. You're not like every other person with a cell phone and relying on their cell phone to accurately plot a map. You're bringing a real GPS.
Right. I got a Garmin Oregon. I really don't like it, actually. I had the Garmin Dakota 20. I really liked that one. I ended up selling that one to a coworker, and I ended up getting a newer one with this big fancy camera on it. I'm like, what do you need a camera for on GPS? I don't know, but I don't know. So I bought it thinking it was going to be cool, but it ended up, it kind of acts as a phone where, like, when you flip it, it flips and stuff.
Okay.
And like the screen flips, and I don't necessarily like that.
Oh, okay.
Especially when your fingers are muddy or whatever, and all that. But yeah, I mean, I use a GPS for the most part. I do have some apps and stuff on my phone, but for the most part, the GPS is what I'm using. But to get back to what I was saying, so then I'll pop everything up on the computer after I'm done scouting. And you would be like, if you've never done this, be blown away by like what you envision and see after you put it on the computer. You're like, wow, okay, now this makes a lot more sense, and why the deer are going through here and stuff. And the more times you do it, it's just the easier it gets to just pick apart maps.
You're able to go back and look at. You're able to. So you're. I'm assuming putting waypoints in or something like that. Is that right?
Right. I'll mark all the waypoints on my GPS. It would be rubs, scrapes, whatever, beds, bedding areas. Every human sign. I mark all the human sign, all that on my GPS, and then I'll plug it into my computer on. It's a program called Garmin Basecamp, I think, and that uploads all of the waypoints into Google Earth onto your computer screen, so you can zoom in and out on your computer screen and look at all of the little points that you marked, where you walked, and all that. And it helps a ton. Oh
wow! Okay, so you get home, you plug this in, it downloads the information, and then it pushes it right to a Google map, and then you're able to look at it from a satellite's view and see. Okay, that's cool. And so on this Garmin, and that's probably a whole other episode. I won't even get into that. Sorry. We can have a podcast about how to use a Garmin. So you've got the Oregon 600 or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cool. I had no idea that anything like that existed. I think, when you and I talked a while ago, I told you that I'd been hunting the same property for the last 13, 14 years. I mean, how boring is that, right? That train has run out of tracks, or will very soon for me. So I'm gonna give it a shot this year and join the ranks of guys like yourself that I tremendously respect for what you do. I know that there's a lot of effort that goes in to what you do, and it's not for the faint of heart. You talk about mentally keeping yourself in the game. I can imagine that would be tough to walk in a mile and a half or whatever, canoe in and do this, that, and the other, only to be sitting up in a tree and have a squirrel hunter walk by, or whatever the case is.
or get shot at.
Or get shot at. That sucks.
Oh yeah, I've had that happen before.
Ah, boy.
But I guess, like what you said, the mental part of it is the biggest thing. Is you could go, like, I went 9 or 10 sits early season in a row without seeing a single deer. And
oh my God.
And after doing that, when you talk to I'm hunting early season. I was hunting primarily where I thought the buck beds and the buck bedding areas would be. So for the most part, I was hunting a specific deer or a specific little area, and I wasn't hunting like field edges or whatever where you're going to see how many deer a night or whatever. So you go, kayak, a mile or whatever. Then you walk in and you set up all your gear, all your camera stuff, just to not see anything 9 times in a row. And to do all that, come back, pack everything up. You get home late at night and then you have to get up early for, hunting again or whatever you're getting up for. And that can take a huge toll on your brain. Like, you're just like, man, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. And then especially when you're talking to your buddies that, a lot of them have their own land or they got food plots or whatever. And, oh yeah, I saw 10 deer last night. And, oh man, I saw all these big bucks and stuff. And you're thinking, oh man, that is the worst part. But if you can get through it, if you can just keep telling yourself what I tell myself is it takes 30 seconds. It takes one hunt. That's all it takes. I could have been set up on a buck bed perfectly, and that, who knows, that buck could have been there. He could have been bedded there. He just didn't get up, or he wasn't there at all. Like, I've had a lot of, times where I've went into public land hunting bedding areas and buck beds, and I'm like, man, this is a prime setup. I got a cold front, perfect crosswind, everything's good. I'm going to kill a big buck tonight, big tracks, rubs and everything. And you don't see anything. And it like takes a big toll on you. But then it all reminds me back to late season. I had the worst hunt ever. I ended up walking like 3 miles in a circle, trying to cut some tracks to some bedding areas. And then I ended up coming back and shot that buck on the ground in some stupid chair, like 150 yards from the parking lot. And that's what it takes, is just not giving up. It just, one hunt is all.
Yeah, I can't even imagine some of the mental battles that you have to go through just sticking it out in some of those spots. It wasn't that long ago that I did a podcast with a guy by the name of Brandon Hammonds, who also has a podcast called Take Aim Outdoors, who you may remember, because I think he may have been on the White Knuckle team when you were on the White Knuckle team, but I'm not sure. Regardless, he said the same thing. It's great if you want to go out and sit on the edge of a field and see a whole bunch of deer, but at the end of the day, that's not stacking the deck in your favor. If you want to stack the deck in your favor, and that's to kill a deer, then you need to get to where you're going to have the chance at seeing one deer, the deer that you're looking for.
Right, the deer.
Right. Cool. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time, and if you have anything else to add, any final thoughts, marching orders, any of that good stuff?
Nothing, I guess, other than a big thanks. I was pretty pumped when I don't know if you messaged me. Did you message me on Facebook? You messaged me, I think, and asked if I wanted to come on this podcast. I was pretty excited about that because, I was kind of how I got my foot in the door with White Knuckle Productions. I was trying to get on the DVD, and I was a huge fan of Todd and you guys, and I just remember watching The Grind, the DVD, The Grind, and that DVD still gets me. I love that DVD, and you guys always have been inspiration to me growing up, so.
Well, thanks.
I guess I wouldn't be here where I am today if it wasn't for you guys at White Knuckle. So.
Well, thank you. I'll
appreciate that.
I'll be sure and relay the message, and thank you for coming on the show and giving away some of your secrets. So, hey, as long as I've got you, Curtis, do us all a favor and tell us where we could find the show that it is that you produce.
Behind the Bowl. Right now, we're currently just working on the website, but if you go onto our YouTube channel, just type in Behind the Bowl on YouTube, and all our videos will pop up. If you want to subscribe to our channel, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, Behind the Bowl on Facebook, and then _ Behind the Bowl _ on Instagram at Behind the Bowl, and you'll find us there too as well.
Okay, cool. And I'll put all that stuff in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check out what Curtis has got going on in any of the past seasons, you can check out his Facebook page or his YouTube channel and access any of his information that way. I'll have that all in the show notes. So again, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk again when I have this all wrapped up.
Sounds good, Jason. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. Installment number 2 in our series of 4 different podcasts on public land hunting. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did asking the questions. I pick up something new every time I do one of these, and pick up something new every time I edit one of these. So it's been a tremendous amount of fun to get to be part of this. So again, if you have any feedback, please go ahead on our Facebook page and make note of that. We'd love to hear what you think. Also, we need your reviews on iTunes. If you don't know how to do that, go ahead and go to iTunes and look for the search bar in the top right. Put in White Knuckle Podcast. When you find White Knuckle Podcast, go ahead and subscribe to that podcast. Every time we publish an issue, it will appear on your mobile device or whatever iDevice you have. The same goes for Stitcher if you're using an Android device. Please give us a review on any of those venues. They certainly help us get better doing what it is that we do. With that, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Have a good rest of your week. Jason out.